Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Northern Kentucky Forum. I am Mark McGurk, the director of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at Northern Kentucky University. We are one of the partners in the forum, along with our three public library districts in Northern Kentucky. And we're delighted tonight to talk about the performing arts and the changing landscape of the performing arts. So this has been a difficult year for all of us, and for arts organizations that are used to being in person to entertain us. There's been a lot of pivoting and adjustment, and now we hope we're moving out of that so we can hear how that's going in the arts community. And we're delighted to have a wonderful panel to speak with us. I want to invite you. We'll have a second part of this on May the 25th, Changing Landscape in Film and Theater. So put that down on your calendar. And in between, we'll change gears a little bit. The forum is committed to discussing public affairs in our community. And on May the 13th at 6:30, we'll be with the director of OKI to talk about the future of automated vehicles in our community. So mark that date as well, and follow us on Facebook, and you can see all of those events, plus nkyforum.org. So thank you for being with us. We are delighted to have as our moderator tonight Margaret McGurk, who was a longtime film critic for the Cincinnati Enquirer. So we knew which movies, you remember when we used to go see movies, and Margaret guided us toward which ones to pick to have an entertaining weekend. And she is now retired from that work, but remains an active writer and editor. So Margaret, welcome, and let me give it to you.
Thank you, Mark. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panel members. I am going to dig right in, and I'm going to start with Alecia. Given the special as the executive director of the ArtsWave, which is such an important organization. If anybody's unfamiliar with it, please look it up, because this is a group that raises money to distribute to a broad range of arts groups. It dates back to the 1920s, I believe, is when it was originally founded, and it has just grown and grown and grown. Their signature has been employee donations. You could sign up to have a little money taken out of your paycheck, every paycheck, to go to the arts, which was proved to be a wonderful model that has been stolen by other arts groups around the country. But obviously this past year has been a horrendous challenge for everybody when it comes to financing. Everything about the way that arts groups raise funds has been disrupted. And I wonder if you could, A, tell us something about the nature of that disruption. What do you see when you look at the landscape? And B, what is your best bet for recovery? What are people going to have to do? What are these organizations going to have to do differently or exactly the same in order to get back on their feet?
Well, good afternoon, Margaret. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for this opportunity to spotlight the really significant challenges that arts organizations have faced over the last year. In many ways, it's been devastating. And then in other ways, we have seen the arts really do what they do best, which is uplift and inspire us, even in these most unexpected times. But the art sector was really the first sector to be hit by the shutdown, when we could no longer come together the way we do around the arts. And economists also predict that it will be among the last sectors to fully recover in our economy. Attendance probably won't return to normal or to pre-pandemic levels, whatever normal might be, not until 2024. So we really still have a ways to go before we can see arts organizations in our region and across the country resume their operating revenues and their audience numbers and their community engagement at the same capacity they were delivering before the pandemic. The impact on individual artists and all of the members of our creative workforce has been personally devastating. In Ohio, artists, the creative industry suffers from the largest unemployment rate among all sectors. In Ohio, our arts and entertainment sector had an unemployment rate of 26% over the last year, which is nearly twice the percentage of, say, the restaurant industry, which was 14%. And of course, we hear a lot about the devastation in that industry. So for artists and creatives, it's been even more profound. Overall, I think by the time we get back to being in business, hopefully this fall, we will look back on revenue losses from ticket sales and subscriptions and rental fees and contracts over $100 million in Greater Cincinnati, probably closer to 130, 140 million over these 12 plus months. So real economic losses, real personal losses, but as I said, kind of some silver linings of innovation and hope, and the ways that we're going to recover together through the arts, and the inspiration and sense of hope that they provide. So I think that if our organizations can hang on, and if our artists can get reconnected, reemployed, and if people keep supporting the arts now more than ever, Greater Cincinnati will eventually see a cultural boom that we're all waiting for, right after months of social isolation. So I think that day is coming.
Thank you very much. That's interesting information. That a lot of it, I did not know those numbers, and they're scary.
Yeah, they are.
J.R. Cassidy, who is the executive director and music director of the Northern Kentucky, Kentucky Symphony Orchestra. Is that correct? KSO, yes. Which is an organization that has grown tremendously over the length of its life. And one of the ways that you've done that is by creating spin-off groups. You have small groups who have the ability to go out into the community and perform in ways that the whole symphony cannot. And this, I presume, has helped you grow your audience.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What are you looking forward to in terms of that kind of audience outreach, reconnecting with people as we emerge?
Right. I mean, when everything shut down, we looked at it. We looked at the summer of 2020 as an opportunity for us to get back, to playing and getting people together in a safe way. And, we thought certainly that it wouldn't be a big deal in the summer, but it certainly was. But we were able to find a municipality that said, hey, I think we can follow all the rules and get out there and do it safely. And we did. And we had 3 concerts at Tower Park in Fort Thomas with some of these subsidiary groups that you're talking about. And because they could distance on stage and the like. And we saw over 8,000 people in attendance and 5,330 online for those 3 concerts. So we were able to actually go ahead and do that. Now, these were all free concerts. I mean, we're down in ticket revenue. We're down 70%. It's a big hit this year. But at the same time, we thought that it's important to try to take the rules, find the venues that you can actually do something in, and go and try it, and then using the live streaming capability, which I think is here to stay for everybody, because I think that gives you more reach and more opportunity to have the video component to use in various ways. But our small groups, getting back to your question, allow us to do little things. I mean, we actually played with the ArtsWave and their Arts in the Park type of thing in March of all time, early March, I think it was, or no, late March. And it was an 80-degree day. So, I mean, it was perfect. ArtsWave had the Chamber of Commerce weather. But yeah, our Covington, the Voodoo Daddies went out and played. And it was a great opportunity for musicians to get out and for people to gather again at a place where they hadn't done it in many, many months.
All right, well, thanks very much, Jared. That's interesting information. I'm going to talk now to, wait a minute, lost my equipment. I'm going to ask Kimberly. Hi, Kimberly. Oh, there you are. To talk about now at the Carnegie. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's a fantastic old building that's been beautifully restored, and it is home to an arts organization that really has two mainstays. One is stage shows, and one is art gallery, and sometimes they happen at the same time. How have you coped so far? I know the stage productions are kind of a nightmare right now still, but talk a little bit about what you did during these horrible past months to just sort of keep things stitched together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Carnegie, we are located in Covington, and we are a multidisciplinary arts organization. In addition to the theater and the gallery, we also have a very large arts education department as well.
Yeah.
So it is, each one of those departments really had to pivot in their own way in order to get through this past year, and in a way that made sense for that discipline. So from the gallery's perspective, it was a little bit easier in the, we could transition to a virtual gallery. We could still exhibit art and really just monitor social distancing and the number of people that were coming in and all of the mitigation protocols. So that really was probably of the departments, the easiest one to transition to a more virtual model. For the theater, it was reinventing the way that we're doing theater. So within the Carnegie's four walls, we went from very large productions for us and went into a tiny concert model. So putting on shows for 25 people inside within our 450 seat theater, and then also streaming that in, online for virtual content. We also decided pretty shortly after the onset of COVID that we wanted to reinvent the way that we're doing theater. So rather than just staying within our four walls, kind of changing the way that we do and engage and serve our audience as well as our artists. So we recreated and went outside and did movable theater productions and out of the box thinking was required in this moment to make sure that we could engage. So did a movable production of Godspell at Pyramid Hill up in Hamilton, Ohio. We also did a movable production within the Carnegie called Silent Scream. It was a holiday weekend experience, but it was very much about people signing up within their comfortable pods and experiencing the theater, them moving to the different scenes rather than the artist being on the stage. So changing the way in which we're doing things, but still continuing to have something and to serve and have offerings here at the Carnegie. The other side of that is the education department. And over the course of a normal school year, we're serving about 83,000 contact hours of arts education each year. Oh. Most of those happen within our Covington elementary schools. That continued this year. It was completely different than years past. A lot of it was actually through their virtual platform. So doing online content for the children and them engaging in a sometimes daily, sometimes weekly basis, just depending on which school we were working with, and really being flexible with our partnering organizations to serve their needs in the way that suited them from, I mean, week to week. It was an ever-changing, moving target. So we've done everything from in-person. We're back to in-person in schools, which is very exciting for us, but in-person, virtual, and platform-based. So NTI education.
Mm. Well, thank you very much for talking about the educational aspect, because I did know that about the Carnegie, that your teaching classes are important. And one of the people who teaches classes there is Kim Popa. Hi, Kim, who is the co-founder, director, performing member of Pones Dance and Performance Company. And you teach at the Carnegie, you teach at the Art Academy, you've taught at NKY, where you also studied dance. And so education is a big part of your mission too at Pones, obviously. What do you see in your experience from this past year has happened that you think is going to survive? What in the speaking specifically of the educational side, what of these coping mechanisms do you think is going to hang on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Margaret. I do think that virtual learning will be kept in ways that make the arts accessible, hopefully on the daily for students. I know that often when I go into schools, kids are doing like movement moments virtually through a like Go Noodle or some sort of application like that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity now for those things to be curated by local arts groups and brought into schools so that art can happen kind of like a quick art moment to hop into their day. And then I think also, at least for us, I know that there's a real trend towards arts and healing and how the arts can be used to really help with mental health. And I know that I don't think anyone this year hasn't had their mind, drift towards their own mental health, and remembering that, in dance in particular is a physical activity. It feels good in our bodies, but it also does a lot of great things for our brains. It releases, serotonin and dopamine and those feel good things. So moving, or the arts in general, can be a really great expressive tool, especially for young kids who are sitting all day, who are in front of screens or sitting at their desks. I hope that this year will remind people that moving and having artistic catharsis is a really important part of education, as well as the actual like meat and potatoes curriculum.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Kim. I like those. Those are all encouraging answers. JR, let me talk to you about bringing people back into that live experience, because I'd love a live theater experience. I love going to the symphony. I love going to the KSO. I love going to a jazz club. There's no comparison really between listening to even a really fine recording and experiencing the music in person. You just feel it everywhere. Have you thought about any way that you can take what you learned from having to do so much virtually to entice people to come in live and sit in that chair and feel the music hit them right in the chest?
Well, we've throughout, since July of last year, we've been kind of an odd group in that we have always felt like the in-person opportunity should be there. And as long as we followed the rules and found the correct setting to where we could social distance, keep the air circulation at a high level, and do that to allow people to make a choice, whether that's a musician saying, hey, I choose to play, or I'm not ready to come back yet, or an audience member to say, hey, I think I'm ready to get out and come. So we've held our entire subscription series in person and live streamed, so that it's both. And we've had audiences. Our last show, we had over 200 and some people in the warehouse, in the industrial warehouse that we played Dvorak in. To do a symphony and a cello concerto in a warehouse surrounded by pallets of vodka and everything else is a little bit interesting, but it did sound good, and we have a recording of it, and it was live streamed, and so we've kept going, and because we wanted to show people that it could be done. It wasn't. Was it the smart economic fiscal move to do it? Maybe not. Maybe it was just better for us to sit back on our PPP and virtually put out a quartet playing something. But I didn't think that was what we were about. The KSOs tried to make classical music and its derivatives and the concert experience attractive, accessible, and affordable ever since we started this craziness 29 years ago. And I think that's what we wanted to continue. So far, we have a concert scheduled for May 15th at the Newport Car Barn.
Wow.
That's the old Green Line trolley and bus depot in Newport. So again, we're finding venues that are very unconventional to perform in and acoustically challenging and all that, but it's about doing what you have to do in this particular case. Hopefully things will open up a little bit, and our capacities will open as well, and we'll go forward. But we've already been doing that. We just think that it's important for people to have a choice.
Do you know if you'll be able to do the concerts at Devu Park again this year, or is that still in the air?
Covington closed those to us last year. That's why we went to Fort Thomas. This year we're hoping to do something very different. We're hoping to expand during a pandemic to where we're moving 3 concerts per summer to 6.
Wow.
So that it's Saturday nights in Covington's Devu Park and Sunday evenings in Fort Thomas's Tower Park with a live
that's
stream,
great.
with a live stream from Tower Park.
No, that's a very ambitious goal. Congratulations on that.
Well, when we look at it, it seemed to make some sense on a number of levels in terms of the cost and everything else, and the reach. So if we can, double our reach in some ways, especially with the live stream component, we think that's worth the effort and cost.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me go back to Kim Popa and say, have you thought about, in terms of your performance schedule, are you planning to do things differently just because of the lessons you learned? I mean, assuming that things are healthy and the monster is controlled and we can all go out and live again, are you going to keep any of the tactics that you came up with during this and keep using them, do you think?
A great question. Margaret, also, please don't feel badly. I'm going to correct you. My last name is Popa.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Totally okay.
I should have known that. I'm sorry.
It's a tricky one. People get it wrong all the time. But, so Pones is interesting for those who may or may not know about us. We don't have a permanent space. So we're a bit untraditional in that way, which during this particular time period actually really served us well, because we didn't have that overhead of a building. And part of our mission always has been to democratize art, and a big part of that meant being out in public space and being in communities. And I don't want to say caring less about venue and more about people, because I think venues are very important, but that wasn't part of our mission. So I hope, we'll definitely keep that because that was something we always did. We'll definitely remember to keep doing that. And my hope is that maybe that will stick to with some of our collaborators, some of our partners, that that they will also invite us to, potentially be showing them best practices or helping to trend that way for a lot of other organizations to be out in public space. As JR pointed out, it's not always ideal, but I think that if we can figure out the acoustics, figure out, not having a beautiful marley floor to dance on, that we can, care a smidge less about the artistic perfection and start to value the humanity that can come when people are sharing with groups of people who aren't always able to access art, and valuing that over like pure artistic integrity. I hope it's something that will come out of this, so that we can see that art that takes place outside of buildings is legitimized. So that, I don't know that actually really answered your question.
Well, no, I think that's an excellent point. People were forced to try new things, and out of necessity, and out of necessity have come some bright ideas, I think, including, let's go outside more. Kim Best, let me ask you this question. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about arts groups is the enormous amount of lead time it takes to plan a season. It takes a whole year to get 3 months worth of work planned and lined up and everything set and get all your ducks in a row. That was completely blown up in this past year. Do you see any changes to the planning process, or are you just going to have to kind of work your way back into that long-term system again? Or is there other ways of planning now?
It's definitely, some of the planning will have to continue. So some of the setting of the seasons, just to be able to secure the rights and the royalties that you need in order to announce a season, and then be able to get all the pre-production things done. That will have to continue. I think the biggest thing is in this next 12 months, trying to plan so that if the rug somehow gets, taken out from under us again, even in a small way, that we're still able to move forward. So I know from the Carnegie's perspective, we are looking at doing the outdoor performances that we started earlier this month, and then we'll continue through spring. We're also looking at doing that for the first part of our next theater season. So we know that outside is a safer venue. So let's continue that and do that for as long as Cincinnati weather will cooperate with us. And that way we can be sure that we can move forward with the plans that we do have in place. So take out some of the question marks from the equation to be able to confidently put tickets on sale and make those plans and hire those actors and start the rehearsal process. I think that's definitely part of it. Beyond that, it's definitely what we're seeing now is that we don't know what the future holds. A year ago, we were saying, in 6 weeks' time, we're going to do this, and then that got extended and extended. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible with all of our pre-planning, so that we already have contingencies in place for if this, then that. We know what that's going to do. So we know what the litmus is for pulling, pivoting to a different direction in order to continue offering the arts. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson. One of the biggest lessons over the past 12 months is that contingency planning, so that we're not caught off guard the way that we were a year ago.
Yeah. Well, let me go back to Alecia here. I remember thinking back, way back in the ancient history of 2019, that the arts, generally, the cultural scene in Cincinnati really was booming, as evidenced by the fact that the Museum Center got a taxpayer-approved influx of big money. The music hall raised a ton of money to rebuild. Playhouse in the Park is raising a ton of money to build a new facility. Shakespeare, Cincinnati Shakespeare Company raised enough money to build a whole new beautiful venue. And there are others, you know, I mean, there was a lot of money being poured into these institutions. And, you know, a lot of places were doing very well selling tickets. Their attendance was going up and up and up. Are we going to get back to that, do you think? I mean, you mentioned 2024, maybe. I mean, are we just back to survival level then, or is the scene going to boom again, do you think?
Well, I think it's going to boom again. Yeah, I'm an optimist. I think that compared to other parts of the country where cultural organizations may have found themselves in weaker positions at the start of the pandemic than a majority of Greater Cincinnati's organizations, in those places where there were already, you know, financial instabilities, we're seeing more a more difficult time in getting to the restart in those cities. So more organizations are contemplating closing or have in fact closed their doors. And artists are relocating to find different work opportunities. Cincinnati, the region, Greater Cincinnati, cultural organizations, for the most part, were in a fairly stable place, if not, as you say, working on pretty ambitious plans at the start of the pandemic, which meant that they made a lot of sacrifices and hard business decisions along the way to be prepared for the restart that Kim just described really well. And now, of course, we have to make our audiences feel like it is safe and good to come back. And I think we don't know exactly what that will look like from a kind of consumer behavior perspective. But when you think about how much pent up demand there is going to be for live music, live arts, you know, salsa dancing in the square, everybody coming out of their living rooms and reconnecting, the arts are so uniquely positioned to be that kickstart for getting all of us back out and into our communities. So whether the road that takes and what the it's going to be good, Margaret. I think it's going to be good. And why I say that is that in 2020, one of the points of distinction that our region earned that is not something we should overlook despite the chaos of the year, but we were named the 20th most arts vibrant large metro area in the United States, according to the Southern Methodist University's Data Arts Vibrancy Index. And it's the first time that Greater Cincinnati kind of broke onto the index and in number 20 among all large metros in the United States. And that index is very, very data driven, and it's based on the arts dollars in the system. So all of that philanthropy that you just described, as well as all the demand from consumers that ends up as ticket sales, et cetera. It's also based on the volume of artists and organizations working in a particular place. And then the third factor has to do with federal government dollars, which Ohio is very fortunate to get a large allocation every year from the National Endowment for the Arts. So when they put all those pieces together, the arts producers, the arts consumers and donors, and the the dollars that come through the quality metrics of the NEA and State Arts Council, we are really, really, really well positioned for this restart and eventual boom, and in fact have been nationally recognized as such. So I have a lot of hope that we've got really innovative and committed leaders, including 3 on this call today, who you can tell have put heart and soul into figuring this path out and back to full vibrancy. And really, it's just a matter of day by day being flexible, as Kim says, and making the art accessible, as JR and Kim Popa do so well, so that the community sees it, feels it, and wants to re-engage. I think that's what we all need to do, help everybody back to the arts.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, let me remind everyone who is watching, we are taking questions. If you have questions of your own that you would like to hear this distinguished panel answer, please send it along. And we'll share it with everybody. We have one waiting here, but I'm going to go ahead first and ask another question that I wanted to bring to all of you. I'll start with JR. If there were one thing that you would like to see done that would help the individual artists, what would that be? And I know in your case, it's a point of pride that KSO always pays its players. You don't ask people to work for free.
Nope.
So tell us, if there's anything that could be done legislatively or organizationally or whatever that would make life better for those artists, what would you do?
Well, I think what they need to do is be able to get out and play, and obviously be paid for it. And so the idea of people looking and saying, hey, there's ways to go about this. We don't have to sit and wait to be told that it's okay to come out. You have the different organizations that hire musicians, or artists of any ilk, need to say, hey, we can make something happen here. And if we're really smart about it, we can do it and make it work fiscally for ourselves too. So it's really taking the chance and not waiting for permission. I mean, I always said it's better to, ask forgiveness than permission anyway, but that's been my modus operandi.
There you go.
But anyway, no, I just think that you just have to, go out there and make it happen.
Mm. All right, Kim Bass, what would you say to that same question? If there's one thing that you could do that would be good for the artists, or that you could wave a magic wand that you personally wouldn't have to do, or, what would you like to see happen for them?
Very similar to what JR said. It's giving them opportunities to be able to perform, to be able to make their livelihood in their chosen craft. It's finding what those opportunities are, and they might be different from what they were back in 2019. But it's finding the opportunities in order to keep this a vibrant arts area in region, and keep our artists here, so that when we get to 2024 and hopefully before, and we're back to normal operations, we're not trying to rebuild our roster of super talented artists that this region allows us.
Kim Popa, do you have any thoughts on this? I know the dancers live a particularly precarious existence in any market, here as much as anywhere. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the thing that really kept me up at night during the pandemic was not if Pones as an entity would be around, but it was providing for all of our dancers. So we are a collective of 60 dancers who opt into gigs. So that means all of our dancers also work for different entities. They might be actors at Cincy Shakes, they might be actors at the Carnegie, they might, they live a gig life, they cobble together different things to make a living. So there were some things, some systemic leftovers, I guess we could call them, that don't really, that don't work well for artists, for people who are contract workers, most particularly unemployment. And so unemployment at first didn't work for gig workers, for contractors, because they weren't on a normal salary. So even just the system wasn't set up for them to apply. Then it was expanded, but even then it was incredibly complicated. I think a lot of folks gave up because it was so complicated. So we tried to provide as much support as we could to just walk them through it. But I would say, you know, I don't know that the government is going to do any reflection, but if there was reflection about, you know, just legitimizing contractors. And I think those implications would be, of course, outside of the art sector as well. But that is something that I noticed, was that, you know, if you don't have a quote unquote real job, which often dancers and artists aren't considered having, then the unemployment process was really complicated during this time, and really worked against folks who already didn't necessarily have a big safety net to fall back on.
Nice. Let me ask if any of you people on the panel here now have questions for one another. Please let me know. I mean, we can, there's no reason you can't ask one another things too, because you kind of all know what one another do, you know, the things that you do, but I'll bet you've got some interesting thoughts that might apply to someone else's gig, but not yours. In the meantime, I'm going to ask one question that has come in, which is about the future. Everybody is looking forward to the future, all of us. Particularly in the arts community, you have so much to look forward to, but what specific thing, is there one thing that you are most excited about looking forward to in the next couple of years? JR?
You know, the arts, I mean, number one, societies, you know, over millennia are remembered for their arts, and, you know, not all the noise and stuff that we think is so important today. And also there's another accent that's kind of interesting, is that I think people attend the arts because they made it as a kid. You know, they were in the school band or the chorus or theater, or, you know, or danced and the like. And they, you know, maybe they don't do it anymore, but they still are interested in it, and they come out to see or hear this type of art. And so I think that is, as long as we're keeping children engaged and bringing beauty and wonderful experiences and high levels of our craft to them, and helping them see it, to experience it, and also take it on in their youth, for example, then, you know, we're going to continue to thrive generationally. And then if we keep it at a high level, we'll be remembered as well in some ways. I mean, you know, you look at architecture, literature, music, whatever, and quality lasts and everything else goes away. But what I'm looking through in the future is not to just get back. You know, I think that we just need to broaden how we do things, why we do things, but to make sure that you never compromise. I mean, I agree with Kimberly in that, you know, when you have to do art in an unconventional space, or, you know, when wind is blowing or the rain's coming down or whatever, you know, you're gonna lose some of your, you know, the quality here and there. But I think that you should never compromise integrity or standards. And in what we do, and I think we need to really keep going forward. But I think just the idea of trying to go places where you've never gone before, I think that's been what's kept me juiced for 29 years. You know, I don't know how I went from the young guy to the old guy, but I did. But you know, always pushing yourselves as organizations and as artists, so that you, my big thing is don't let anybody tell you no.
Good answer. Good answer. Thank you, JR. Kimberly Best, same question. What are you most looking forward to?
So many things. I think part of it is just the small, simple moments. People walking out of the theater and you overhear them talking about how much they loved the show, what their favorite song was. Just those human moments of shared experience that sometimes give you the goosebumps when you're watching it. Small moments, the things that we probably took for granted in 2019 and before, but the normalness of just coming to see a show, of not having to count people and how far they are away from one another, and did I clean that railing thoroughly enough? All of those other things that are going through my mind as I start getting back to normal type programming, and taking for granted, the stepping back and watching, the large experience happening. So once we get back to that and are able just to appreciate hearing, seeing, experiencing those shared experiences again, I think that's my biggest.
That's a good one. Kim Popa, how about you? Same question. Everybody gets to answer this one. So.
Definitely having that audience and having audience feedback will be, that'll probably be a teary-eyed moment for all of us as performers, because there's, it's irreplaceable. Even if people are socially distanced, it's just different when that will happen at full capacity. But also so as part of Pones education department, we do a lot of arts and healing work with really high risk populations. So we work at the VA hospital, we work at hospice with bedside to bedside care. We work at Linder Center in mental health care and at a couple hospitals. We also work at Ronald McDonald House. So all of those have been off the table because those not only, could we probably not go in anyways, but they're super high risk populations. So I'm most looking forward to getting back into all of that work. It is the work that is really expanding for us and that I'm personally really excited about continuing and getting deeper into. And I also, I think it's unfortunate that this pandemic really has affected at-risk populations, even kind of doubled down on that. So it's disproportionately affected, maybe older folks as well. So I'm looking forward to getting back into the work with those groups in particular, because that really fuels me. And I also think that it's definitely something that's going to be missed.
Alecia, I'm going to pivot with you a little bit. I have a question here that I think is very significant, and given your sort of bird's eye view of so many organizations as well as your own, I think this means something to you, which is this past year up until right now has been jam-packed with definitive events outside the pandemic, and has made the issue of inclusion, diversity, and social justice so important to organizations. It's really at the forefront of a lot of initiatives going on out there. What do you see? How do you see the arts being affected here by these issues?
I'm so glad that you raised that, Margaret. There was definitely a wake-up call in 2020 and a heightened acute awareness of social and racial inequities and injustice. But some of the good news is that the arts and cultural organizations in our region have been on quite a long journey, as has ArtsWave, in thinking about how the arts can be a force for good in bringing people together, in bridging divides between us, in increasing cultural competency, in that healing and recovery. So the work toward diversity, equity, inclusion, and access has been underway at Cincinnati's arts organizations for some time. And when we had that abrupt series of wake-up calls in mid-2020, there were a lot of ways that arts organizations and artists came together quickly to respond and try to help create conversation that could lead to more empathy and understanding and humanity, as Kim said a moment ago. 3 out of 4 Americans actually believe that the arts can unify us. And I can't think of another issue that we might agree on so in such large measure in the United States. So the arts really can be part of this reckoning and eventual reconciliation, and the work of artists and elevating our regional artists of color to a higher public view is a really important outcome coming out of 2020. And you know, we first saw it with our local Black Lives Matter mural organizers, but there have been many initiatives across the region over the last year that have uplifted and showcased artists of color. And I think that will continue in a really exciting and productive way going forward. And as just a sort of a back office note, also long planned before 2020, but manifesting itself over the last year, was a commitment that ArtsWave and all of our largest funded organizations made together to adopt board approved diversity, equity, inclusion, and access plans by the end of 2020. So as I said, that work had been underway for months and in some cases years. And so it happens now that as a collective of 30 or so organizations, everybody has a plan and goals or working to get really specific about those accountability goals. So we're all working toward it together on a journey. And as I said, elevating the work and voices of our Black and Brown and artists of color across the region is really important right now. And it's work that ArtsWave and our partners are certainly committed to doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else has anything in particular on that topic they want to bring up. Kim, Kimberly, JR. I know this has affected everybody to some extent.
Definitely. So our founding ideals were about use theater of the oppressed, and that type of model of using arts for social justice was what we were founded upon. So we definitely, we've continually been doing work for social justice in different arenas, but really focused in on elevating BIPOC voices in response to the protests last year. So we have a initiative called Move, and we produced, I think it was 6 vignettes that we took out into public space, or that were video pieces that were created by artists of color, and we perform them out in spaces as a form of protest, as a form of advocacy. I think Chris has a link to one that you could watch. It's a 9-minute piece called Say Their Names. And we also I put in the chat, we're working alongside Action Tank and Ohio Policy Matters. There's 2 more forums about policing and how to reform to make some budget changes, to reallocate money, and using, again, art as a form of protest, or art as a way to, I think often art is a way that is more visceral, and it kind of gets at people's hearts versus people really having an opinion already, that they are cognitively thinking about an issue and have a response already. So I think art is most definitely part of this conversation, and will continue to be.
We have, hang on, I just lost my questions. Oh, there we go. I'm throwing a little plug here for, I live in East Price Hill, which is sort of the home ground for an organization called My Cincinnati, which teaches very young children to play classical instruments, violin, and it's wonderful. Most of these kids come from families with very limited resources. Some of their parents don't even speak English. And they're having tremendous success, and it's being run by a group of very young trained musicians. To me, they look like teenagers. Let's call them young adults, but they're every year they're creating more and more and more of these young kids who probably wouldn't have had a lot of exposure to classical music in the normal course of their lives without this program. And now they're going to the symphonies and they're listening to concerts, and it's really awakened something in them that they just didn't have. This is something that you were talking about, JR, about awakening the love of music in children across the board, not just in kids whose parents can afford private tutoring and so forth.
Well, I mean, that's the reason that, we have 3 series of concerts throughout the course of the year, and 2 of those are free. They're not free to produce by any stretch of the imagination, but we just thought that one of them is our, education outreach programs. So we have a couple series of concerts, or, concerts that we do each year. And those are free to the schools and the students. So it doesn't cost anybody, anything. We've seen 156,000 kids over the course of the 27 years. And, we just find that that's important. We never wanted, money to be a barrier for them. And this is a supplemental program for teachers and their music curriculums. So this is something we've done for 27 years. And in addition, the concerts in the park are 27 years old this coming summer. And, we think that it's important to bring families together, because that's where memories are made. We're now on another generation of people who bring their kids to, out to the concerts along with grandpa and everybody, to be able to hear concerts like they did back, a generation ago, and a generation prior to that.
Mm.
So it's
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, well, I was going to address another question that's come up through the questions, which is, what do you think about virtual arts, as we have seen so much in this past year? Collective concerts, the online expression of all of these arts. What, do you like it, hate it? It's okay, it'll do in a pinch. It's learned, or it's taught us some valuable new lessons, or, what do you think?
There is nothing that's going to replace the energy of being together in a live performance. There's so many wonderful technological skills. All these arts organizations and many of their executive directors and artistic directors have mastered all kinds of Final Cut Pro and all these other kinds of programs that they've had to do, because that's the only way they could get their art out in a way that they thought was safe. And, I commend them all. I mean, because some of that stuff is really great. There's some fantastic online, arts that are going on, but it's never, it cannot replace the live performance, the ability to go to a museum and see the brush strokes on the canvas. It's not going to replace the theater at all. That there's an energy of and a personal connection to the performer that cannot be translated across a screen. I mean, no wonder, no matter how beautiful it's done or how crisp and high def the image is, it's a separation. And I thought that was something that was always important about, the live performance, is that personal connection to the audience. And so as I marvel at the things that have been done, and I do believe that live streaming is here to stay. I think that if tomorrow somebody snapped their fingers and said that, oh, everything's back to normal, and we went back to I think that the live streaming is going to stay. I mean, we had kids concerts. We only homeschool kids could attend, of course, but we put that out live, and we're getting questions from Texas and West Virginia and all over the place, a reach that we could have never had before, and so I think that aspect is here. The idea that, people may retire to Florida, but they still want to subscribe to the symphony. Well, they can subscribe and watch it, on their television at home now.
Yeah.
And that's something that we haven't been able to do. So I think that's a component here that we went to because we had to, and that one's going to be picked up and kept.
Thank you very much, JR. Before I move on, I'm going to pass along, if you're watching this, you're participating, check the chat function to find links to, number one, Pones is going to be working alongside Action Tank and Ohio Policy Matters on 2 more forums about policing and protest art. You'll find the link in your chat. Likewise, if you go to artswave.org/guide, you will find streamed virtual, live, and arts education experiences from arts groups all across the region under the umbrella of ArtsWave. So check your chat function to get that information. Does anybody else have anything to say about the quality or the value of the new kind of virtual performances we've seen? You've all done them to an extent, but if you have something else you want to throw in there, let me know. Otherwise,
sorry,
I'm sorry.
Margaret.
No, go ahead.
Just quickly, and I think JR was starting to touch on it. I do think a silver lining for us has been that accessibility piece. There are people who have been able to see performances that may not have otherwise, and vice versa. I know as a consumer, I've been able to take classes with teachers that I would have never been able to fly to New York and take class with. I've been able to collaborate with some spoken word artists in Chicago that I would have never been able to fly in. I don't have the budget to fly them to Cincy. So collaboration across the nation, international even, has been a silver lining. And also archival purposes. I have more archive of my dance performances than I ever did before, because that was always secondary in my mind. And now I do have some nice, crispy, good-looking video that I can put out to the world. It was made via necessity, but it really does help further when people want to see examples of our work. Then I have it readily available, whereas I might not have made the decision to invest money in filming those pieces otherwise.
Let me ask Alecia a related question. I have always thought that, like, the theater groups, like the local theater groups, for example, should have video archives of all their performances, and very few of them do. Are there legal issues with that? I mean, are those only available for private educational purposes within the organization, or could they also be shown to the public? Like, here's a blast from the past, when we did
Right.
this show. Then they get into all kinds of rights and copyrights and things like that. Right?
Yes, it's immensely complicated. There are legal issues, copyright issues, union issues for not only the front stage performers, but also the technicians and behind the scenes folks. So it varies in complexity, and there are certain titles and certain productions that can be in the public domain and put out to the public in video format, but it's not as simple as just recording this year's season and making it available online. And everybody's nodding because it seems like it should be that easy, but it's just not.
Too bad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have another. This is a good question from Mark McGurk. Here's Kimberly. Let's start with you at the Carnegie. Can you think of one story from this past era of deprivation and terror, a story about resiliency, somebody who really bounced back, or something that just really went well because somebody got ingenious, something inspiring? I think is what we're looking for here.
I think there's several ways that happened over the course of the year. Through our theater department, at the beginning of this, we decided that we were going to change the paradigm of the way that we are serving theater in this region. Like Alecia just said, there's so many rights and royalty issues to just live streaming a production that we had to change the way that we could do things. So we decided that we were going to form a new committee within the Carnegie, and it's the Creative Disruption Committee, pun intended, of the Carnegie CDC. It was on our mind a lot, when we were but it is really an action group of makers and business people and marketers to say, let's pitch ideas. Let's come together rather than a typical gatekeeper. How do I get an audition? How do I get in front of the people that choose the productions? Those type of things, and say, like, let's throw open the doors and see what our fellow neighbors are wanting to do. It's something that is a cornerstone within our DEIA plan, because it is throwing open the doors to underserved artists, audience members. We don't necessarily have large budgets for these productions. So in turn, we don't have large expenses to cover. So it can be far more accessible than, the $30 that we charge for normal theater productions. So it's the resiliency of, do you have an idea? Let's talk about it. Can we do it? All right. The ball's already, moving and in the works. I think that's probably the biggest one. And even just like from the education standpoint of trying to figure out how to successfully engage and have those personal connections with our students in a virtual world, that's really hard to do. We found, great platforms to do that. There's this great platform called Flipgrid, and it's, having the students submit their work, getting our feedback, having that conversation, and keeping it going, keeping that connection. And quite honestly, it was so successful that the math teachers were telling us we weren't allowed to post our classes until after they did, because it was what the kids were looking forward to. They were wanting that connection. They were wanting that experience. And we weren't necessarily sure at the onset how it was going to work. So that was a big win for us as well.
That sounds like fun. How about you, Alecia? I bet you've seen a lot of resiliency in action.
I have. Yes, incredible resiliency. What it made me initially think of, though, is a local actor who's, I know, been part of the Carnegie's family at one time or another, and he's part of an acting family and had been in New York City at the time the pandemic started, working, making a living in New York City, but roots in the Cincinnati region, of course. He ended up coming back home and trying to figure out what to do with himself and living with his parents again. And what he ended up doing with himself was advocating with our elected officials at the local, county, and state level for support for individual artists, like we were talking about a few moments ago. And, you know, here I am in the fundraising and advocacy business, but Kelsey managed to get through in a way that I haven't or hadn't. And he, through his sheer tenacity and resilience and personal story, paved the way for what ultimately was, you know, the work of a lot of people, securing CARES Act dollars for independent artist relief. And it took us months, took us all the way until November to get to that point. So I won't say that we were able to do it fast enough or flexibly enough, but we got there, thankfully. And then we ended up getting more CARES Act dollars for organizations. And now we're talking about the American Rescue Plan and how we can put dollars into action for artists. And I think, you know, working together, one silver lining and story of resilience might be that we work to make Cincinnati region a magnet for more artists. Like, not only improve conditions for our incredible community now, but like, let's rebuild so that we are the place where creative professionals want to be living and working with these incredible leaders. So one guy's resilience and bad fortune of the moment, the collective bad fortune has led to a big impact with government funding.
Oh, that's a great story. I love
Yeah.
that. Kim Popa, how about you?
Yeah, I think there were many stories of resiliency. The thing that really popped into my mind first was thinking about Cincinnati as the arts community. I feel like has really shown resiliency in supporting each other. I know, for example, Kim opened their doors at the Carnegie for us to film something there. I don't know how many chairs she had to wipe down after we used them. Sorry about that, Kim. But you know, ETC has let us use some rehearsal space because that's very limited. So just at least in my experience, and this has kind of always been true, but it became even more true during the pandemic, is that people within different arts sectors are, and you know, just within the arts community, are willing to share resources, to share ideas. And that feels like not only momentary resiliency, but to speak to what Alecia was talking about, something that I think can be carried forward and will only make the arts community here more attractive, is that it's not super competitive, cutthroat. We do want to see other organizations succeed.
Cool. JR, what do you think?
You know, when I think about it, I think about the entire community. And one of the reasons that I stayed here after my getting my master's at CCM, the community, you know, kind of will rise up and help out. You know, when we thought we had it made, you know, we had the summer and look at all these people that came, we did this, we did that. And then the fall came and we had to go indoors. Well, indoors is a whole new animal, you know, during this. And, you know, all of our schools or universities, churches and everything, you know, really didn't, we weren't able to go there and perform and rehearse and perform. And so I found that the community really kind of rose up. I mean, I called out to Paul Verst at First Group Logistics and said, hey, Paul, do you have any warehouses that we might do something in? And the next day he says, I got 3. You want to go? Let's go tour them the next day, you know, and he opened his workers, his staff, and everything else. Now and now that's one thing to do it in a warehouse, but when you do a show, you're not only bringing all of your equipment in order to perform, chair stands, lights, and all, and sound, all kinds of different things. You have to bring chairs for the audience too. So, like, where are we getting all this stuff? Because renting it, puts us behind the 8 ball financially. So here we have, Newport on the Levee, the Bellevue Vets, now Newport Catholic for our next show are saying, oh, come get our chairs, and allowing us to use them. Or if we don't have rehearsal space, hey, the city of Bellevue, I'll open up Joe's Crab Shack for you. And so we're holding rehearsals in Joe's Crab Shack. And we're all over the place. So it just shows you that the community will come together to support you in other ways than just financially. They'll roll up their sleeves and say, hey, let me give you a hand. The same thing happened with St. Peter and Chains Cathedral Basilica. They said, Jar, we love what you do over there and the beautiful performers that you have and everything else. It says if it'll fit at the cathedral and make some sense to be there, bring it on in. And we did. So it just shows that, and then I for the last concert we got coming up, I was turned down by 9 venues. And I didn't know until 10 days ago where I was going to hold this concert on May 15th. And finally this Newport Car Barn and the owners and then the city got together to give us permission to actually do it. And there we go. So, I mean, it just shows you how many people really do you can reach out to and depend upon to come to your rescue when you need it. So I think that was the aspect that I thought through all of this that has been really marvelous is everybody willing to step up to say, hey, we believe in you and we want to help.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we are just about ready to wrap it up here. This has been a lot of fun for me. I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. Does anybody have a final thought they'd like to share? Or have I just wrung it all out of you? Are you completely talked out? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Well, I'll just make a plug for the 2021 ArtsWave Community Campaign, which is now underway, and will support the Carnegie and the KSO and Pones and 100 more plus. We have a goal of $11 million and we are 80% of the way there.
There you go, piece of cake.
Yeah, well, no, the last 20% is the hardest. So if you haven't made your contribution, we are grateful for your consideration, and the restart is going to be so exciting as long as the community comes along with us. So thank you.
That's wonderful. And if you look in the chat, you can find a link to the ArtsWave campaign. And yeah, give them some money. We need them. We need all of these guys, and ArtsWave is an efficient way to take care of a lot of different artists all at once. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Northern Kentucky Forum for supporting this wonderful project. And come back next month when we'll be talking about film and stage production. That's going to be interesting. All right. Thank you all. Good night.
Bye. Thank you, Margaret. Thanks, Chris. Bye, Kim. I hope I see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Okay.